Thank you, Peter, for this introduction. And yes, if I stand in front of you, it's because I did survive Wagga. So no offense to the people from the Riverina. I did have a great time in Wagga Wagga, to the extent that I was back there this weekend, 20 years later. Today, I'm here to talk to you about what has become a little bit of a dirty word in the industry, which is casualization. In fact, John Roberts from AWI asked me if I would be willing to come here to understand where we are at with the so-called casualization of fashion. Why did that happen? What are the reasons which took us where we are today? And more importantly, where that may be leading us. In other words, this is how on earth did we go from this to that? So you've got Gary Grant in the 40s wearing his free suit, woolen suit, felt hat and ties, to that gentleman, I'm not sure if he's from Mars or Uranus, wearing a worsted suit though, but tucked into his underwear or shorts. More seriously, the question is, how did formal fashion came to what we see today as streetwear? Not an easy question to answer. You don't really know where to start, but I thought the best way to start was to go through the beginning, and the beginning in Dormeuil is going back to 1842. As Peter mentioned, the company is over 180 years today, and it was created by Jules Dormeuil, one of the three founding fathers. The three founding fathers you still see in our logos, symbolized by the three ram's head you will see later on. So Jules, at the time, we were towards the end of the Industrial Revolution. There was many very good worsted and woolen mills in England. Jules and his brothers had the clever idea to go around the factories in the north of England, buy what we call today full pieces, full rolls of fine fabric, bring it to Paris to service the many tailors, bespoke tailors we used to have in Paris and in France in general. Obviously, we were living in a very different world compared to what we are today. Fashion show had not even started. It just happened that in 1842, that was the first ever fashion show held in London. We had to wait for another 10 years for the first department store to open, which is the Bon Marché in Paris, the Bon Marché which today belongs to LVMH and remains one of the reference when it comes down to fine worsted and woolen fabric. So a very different world indeed. If you look at the way Jules was dressed up on that picture, rather formal one say, but the formality did not only go for men's. In fact, ladies were extremely formal at the time. It was when what we call the crinoline was very popular, and ladies did not have any big problem changing 4 or 5 times a day depending on the occasion. So really at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century is what I call the peak of formal, the peak of bespoke, and it's not until the 20s that things started to relax a little bit. Indeed, First World War was over, people had a different angle on life, they wanted to relax a little bit, jazz was happening, Art Deco movement was impacting a lot of things in life. And if you look at these two ladies, look how more relaxed they are compared to the previous picture. In fact, very often, casualization was led by the ladies. They are wearing these very baggy pants back in the 20s. Obviously, this may be when ladies started to wear pants, and has never stopped since then. But these baggy pants are not very different from what you can see today in the department store in Paris or in New York. And the good news is if baggy is back, it is often made of merino wool. Men's, in the meantime, remains very formal for their daily activity, as testified by this picture. However, it is the time when men's and ladies starting to do sports. And coincidentally, it's when Dormeuil launched one of its iconic fabric called Sportex, because when you were going hunting, when you were going on the court to play tennis, you were wearing wool at the time. You have here a picture of René Lacoste, a famous French tennis player. We created that worldwide brand later on, wearing our Sportex trousers back in the 30s. Unfortunately, late 20s and during the 30s, things starting to get very, very complicated in Europe for, as we all know, World War II happened. But the good news is fashion did survive. Fashion did survive the war, and very early in the 40s, haute couture houses everywhere in Paris started to open up again. I will only name one of them, which is Christian Dior, which reopened very, very quickly as soon as the war was over. And something important happened then, which is these haute couture, which were created very unique models, started to sell them to the American buyers for mass production in the US. To me, that's an important step, because that's the beginning of what we will call later on the ready-to-wear. Again, as you see in that picture, men's tend to resist and still look very formal. And once again, there seems to be a bit of a wind of freedom on ladies' fashion, including when it comes down to swimwear, with the famous bikini, which was invented by a French man, and which got a rather explosive reaction in a society which was at the time very, very conservative. So in fact, in the 50s, many things were there for something big to happen in fashion. First of all, economies were doing very well in most countries. The industry was flourishing in many different fields. New fibers were invented. The middle class was growing. People wanted to go to the office. This was the era of the salaryman. You wanted a standard outfit. This standard outfit very quickly became requested by more and more people as the middle class grew. And back in the 50s, we should not forget that marketing and advertising was really booming, thus creating the demand, diffusing the fashion trends, diffusing the fashion brand. All this led to the establishment of the ready-to-wear, which to me was really the decline of formal as we knew it. Obviously, in the 60s, ladies continued to lead the way in terms of dressing down and adopting more and more of the men's wardrobe. You see here a drawing from Mr. Yves Saint Laurent, who invented the first tuxedo with ladies, actually using the Dormeuil Barathea, black Barathea fabric that we still sell very much today. The 60s were a very disruptive year in general for the society. You had Andy Warhol in New York with his crazy color. You had all the pop culture with the Beatles and the Rolling Stone, who started to really introduce what I called a degree of rebellion in the way people dressed up. Even on the ladies, to the despair of my grandmother, Marie Quant invented the mini skirt. And again, ladies led the way on that regard. So really a very buoyant time in general when it comes down to fashion in the 60s and the 70s, because the rebellion continued. The rebellion continued, with the hippies, which were very big on their flared trousers and big floral design. Obviously, the disco and the disco mania of Studio 54 and etc. had a big impact on how people dressed. And it's interesting to see that in reaction to all this disruption in fashion, the privileged kids which were getting, first-class education in the Ivy Leagues on the northeast of America, reacted by redeveloping a very classic style, which came to be known as the preppy look. Preppy look, which was very quickly identified by a guy called Ralph Lipschitz as a very big potential, and he turned it into a global empire under the brand of Ralph Lauren. So 70s continue to defy fashion, but I think in the 70s, the movement which defies fashion the most is the hip-hop movement. I didn't know about it, frankly speaking, before I started to work on this presentation. But the hip-hop movement is yet again a reaction to all the glitzy and fancy New York dance floor with disco time. You have these black American, Caribbean, which cannot afford the fancy nightclubs of New York. So what they do is they gather together, they bring their own turntables, they start making their own music, and they start to dance. And to dance, you need to be comfortable. Then therefore, they start coming with very baggy pants, jog pants, very comfortable shoes, sneakers, and this is how the streetwear was born. So this is going back a fair bit of time. So it was coming, it is now here. I quickly go on over the 80s. The 80s, obviously, the casualization continued, especially with the movement, the punk movement, which was very, very disruptive back in the 80s with someone like Vivienne Westwood, which is still seen as the queen of fashion, of punk fashion today. But in the 80s, it's interesting to see that while casualization gathered speed, television continued to promote a very formal way of dressing. You know, if I refer here to this big TV series of the 80s called Dynasties that some of you may have seen, and you can see from these two pictures that you know, people were dressing very formally on television when the market was starting to move the other way. Another exception I should mention in the 80s in terms of casualization is obviously Japan, because Japan has always been a very, very big market for fine worsted wool. It continued to be in the 80s and the 90s because people continue to dress up to go to the office. Unfortunately, we will see that later on that changed. With the arrival of the new millennium, internet really started to gain momentum. With internet came what I call the global marketing, and therefore casualization continued to speed up. Especially in the period between 2010 and 2020. So I cannot afford the time to go through all these different reasons why casualization gained speed in these 10 years. But I will just take one example. If I give you a date, 11th of March 2011, I don't know if that rings a bell to everyone in the room, this is when Japan was hit with a big natural disaster, which started as an earthquake, turned into a tsunami, and turned into one of the major nuclear disasters in the world. Why am I talking about this today? Because I was surprised to understand very quickly the impact it had on the way the Japanese people dressed up. In fact, a few months after the Fukushima, Japan ended up being short of electricity power, and the government gave a new code of conduct to its people, which is, for the first time ever, the office worker, Japanese office worker, was allowed to go to work without wearing a suit, without wearing a tie. And this is a small example to illustrate how, you know, fashion and the way to dress can change very quickly, like it happened in Japan back in 2011. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen that in over 180 years that Dormeuil has been in activity. Fashion has changed a lot. The way people dressed has changed a lot. We have talked about industrial revolution. We've talked about technological progress, internet. I didn't drill into the impact of political movements such as, you know, the socialism on the way people dress, but, you know, the working class movement in the 1900s can still be seen today in the way people dress as they wear work jacket, for example, very, very popular at the moment. We talked about war, natural disaster, we've talked about the artistic movement, and obviously all the big evolution of what I call society values. I could not close that travel in time without talking about what happened lately, which is the global pandemic. You know, and We all know what happened during pandemic, but I will just simply quote one man, which was very, very important in fashion. I call him Kaiser Karl. We are talking about Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld was the head of Chanel for many, many years. Back in 2013, Karl did a quote to the newspaper Le Monde in Paris. He said, jogging pants are a clear sign of defeat. It is when you have lost control of your life that you start going out in jogging gears. And I'm sorry, but that's exactly precisely what happened during COVID. People simply forgot what dressing up meant. So they obviously lose control of their life. And as Peter mentioned earlier on, you know, these e-commerce went through the roof during COVID. But unfortunately, the brands which successfully sold their gear during the COVID period online were far from what I would call fashionable brands. So all this obviously had a big impact on the way people dress and on the sale of formal suit. I'm going to reuse now a slide that some of you may have seen in the last IWTO conference in Kyoto. Here this slide was presented by a representative of Aoyama Trading. Aoyama Trading, just so that everyone understands, they are not a small fish. Aoyama Trading in 1998 was listed as the #1 suit seller in the world. They entered the Guinness Book of Record as such. And you can see that in the space of 6 years, when their business historically has been basically 100% formal business suit, in the space of 6 years, they have lost 20% of selling the very formal suit. So they moved on to other things so that they could maintain their activity. But my message here today is don't lose hope. There is hope. There is a lot of things happening in the market, and wool is absolutely a must for the world. As Peter said again earlier on, suit is not dead, far from it. We must remember one thing. In fashion, what goes around comes around. And I will use this saying from Lee Edelcourt. Lee is what I call a fashion forecaster. She's handsomely paid to tell the brands what may happen in fashion in 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years' time. But she's very pragmatic about her job. You know, she says, I'm not a guru. I do not pluck ideas out of the sky. I generally dig up the past and reactivate the future. This is precisely what fashion is about. And this is exactly what is happening at the moment. Because we have seen that fashion has been super formal for many years. From being super formal, it went into the ready-to-wear for 50, 70 years. Ready-to-wear was really dominant. But now I can see the first split in the dominant ready-to-wear market. You have on one hand what I call the fast fashion, but now we are talking about super fast fashion, you know, the Shein of that world, Zara, H&M, etc. So that super fast fashion and accessory which are heavily sold on the internet with all the impact we know on environment and etc. And you have the appearance on the other end of what I call a new formal. And this is, for me, a very, very important message I want to carry to everyone in the room today about that new formal. Because it is definitely happening. It is coming back as people after the COVID wants to dress up. They want to dress up again. Yes, the new formal is slightly less formal than the old formal. It is what one would say a formal with a bit more freedom of expression. Yes, the new formal will be niche. Let's not fool ourselves. We're not going to go back to the big volume of the 50s and 40s, 50s and 60s when wool was really, really popular. But the new formal will be there. It will be niche, and it will be very often upmarket. Upmarket meaning using finer wool, more prestigious farms, etc., etc. So what is this new formal I'm trying to explain and talk about today? I try to categorize it, and the first category which comes to my mind is what I call occasional dressing. People want to dress up again. They want to dress up to go to parties. They want to dress up to the races. I know you've got a very, very big race in Wagga Wagga. It's called the Gold Cup. And I can tell you people are still dressing up for this, and they will continue to do so. But one of the big, big things after COVID was the wedding business. Wedding literally went through the roof last year. Because people wanted to get married again, and we're not talking about the old-fashioned wedding, no, not at all. The young people, which are very keen on getting married, do it with a different angle. They are heavily influenced by Instagram, they're heavily influenced with everything they see on social media. They will run theme weddings, country weddings, all sorts of weddings, and very often, this is the occasion for the groom at least, to wear its first wool suit. There is, beside what I call the occasional dressing, there is a new casual elegance that you will see on the street. That casual elegance can be expressed by wearing a bomber jacket out of fine worsted fabric, for example. It can be also wearing a mix and match, so where you have a chino coming from Uniqlo that you match with a fine worsted blazer. It could be wearing a turtleneck under your blazer rather than a shirt. So a lot of things is happening and the fashion is changing, and that is not bad news at all for wool, far from it. You see also a lot of this new formal in what I call the luxury brands of this world. Clearly, the market is dominated today by these luxury brands which belongs to this big group, mainly LVMH and Kering. Thank God they are customer of Dormeuil for many years. But you can see in these pictures I've selected from their fashion show that from far, a lot of them are back to sartorial. You can clearly see here the formality of that. It's formal with a bit of a twist, but it's still, you can see the suit for that, and that's for ladies and women. But for me, excuse me. But for me, the biggest potential for the new formal is what I call custom clothing. What is custom clothing? We all hear about custom clothing. Basically, to define it, it can be defined in two distinctive groups. There is what I call the made-to-order or the easy order. We are talking here about a suit which has very possibilities of adjustment. It is very normally possible to order made-to-order suits in very short runs, short series, quick replenishment, which is very important for the retailers of today. And you obviously have the made-to-measure. Made-to-measure is a suit which is absolutely unique in its measurement, unique in its fabric, in its lining, in its woven label. So for me, made-to-measure and in general custom clothing will lead the world. I've just put here the illustration of what is a made-to-measure chart. So when we sell a made-to-measure suit today, that gives you a bit of an idea on how far you can go in personalizing your suit. And don't be fooled, the ready-to-wear, the made-to-measure, is not just for the elite any longer. One may think, I can afford a made-to-measure suit. Yes, in most markets, you can find a custom-made suit for as low as €500 per suit. Obviously, it's not going to be in Dormeuil fabric, but it's still very often in wool-based fabric. In fact, we clearly see a change in the market. Custom clothing is taking over the ready-to-wear. Retailers of this world are sick and tired to having to order, big quantity of suits 6 months before the beginning of the season, 6 months before they know what their customer will want, 6 months before they know what the economy will do. They much rather wait until the last minute and reorder, small series to replenish their shop, or make unique suits for their customer. So this is very, for me, this is the big potential I see going forward for wool fabric in general. At the moment, we have a limitation in custom clothing, and that limitation is down to what I call industrial capacity. The production of custom clothing in the world is very, very concentrated. Basically, you can say it's Europe, with, of course, a dominant country, which is Italy, but you have a few factories in Eastern Europe and Portugal, and obviously in China as well, with with the leading factories of the world. You know, here we are, sorry, this is not working. No, that did not work. Okay, there was supposed to be a movie here, but it's not happening. Anyway, you can see here one of the leading made-to-measure factory in China that I was fortunate to visit not long ago. We are talking about a factory which can produce 400,000 to 500,000 suits per year, remembering that every single suit is unique. Every single suit can potentially use a different fabric, a different lining, and etc. So I'll let you imagine the complexity of producing custom clothing compared to the production of big ready-to-wear run like we used to do back in the 60s. But to me, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the future for wool. As the capacity, the industrial capacity of the world grows, because the demand grows, there will be more and more of your wool which will be used for this custom clothing business around the world. Indeed, we have also what I call newcomers. I call them CMT houses. CMT stands for cut, make, and trim. These newcomers are what I call B2B players. They don't own a stitching factory. They're just the middleman. They're the middleman between, very often, traveling tailor, which is a one-man band. That one man or that one woman, because you have more and more ladies doing traveling tailor in the world, that one-man band doesn't have time to deal with the complexity and the administrative work of ordering a single suit for his customer. His job is to sell, sell, sell. He goes around his private customers, he goes to their office, and he sells them new suits every season. Then he passes the order to that CMT houses. The CMT houses will deal for everything with him. They will give us the order. We will ship the fabric to wherever the factory they have selected, and then the suit will eventually be delivered to the final consumer. This is predominantly in the States, as traveling tailor is very, very big. We talked about brick and mortar stores earlier on. We talked about digitalization. Traveling tailor is, for me, something which is going to grow going forward, and will also offer a big potential for your fine wool. But of course, we have also new breeds of retailer. Forget about the old dusty bespoke tailor shop. This is over. You know, last time I was in Japan, I took a couple of pictures here. This is two clients we have in Japan, and you can see how fresh the shops are. You know, these guys do, of course, the formal suiting, but they do a lot of other product custom made. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is definitely a new formal. You may not see it, but it is there, I can tell you. The new formal will be made to measure. It will be for men's and ladies, because custom made is gaining very nice momentum with the ladies' wear. It will be innovative and functional, because that's what the new generation want. They need something different. And they need also something eco-friendly with all the complexity it represents for the supply chain. All what I'm saying here is not wishful thinking. You know, I've just gone back to Aoyama trading. This slide shows you that between 2019 and 2022, while Aoyama lost 25% of their formal suit, you know, a ready-to-wear suit, they grew sevenfold their made-to-measure business. So this is happening. This is happening. The big question is, how do we answer that new market. At the end of the day, one word is probably innovation. We need to innovate at every step of the chain. Obviously, the garment manufacturers and the brand need to innovate in what they offer to the market. I don't have time to talk about sportswear and outerwear, but I really believe a big future for custom clothing is in outerwear. And of course, being outerwear, it very often involves wool. One of the latest success we had in Dormeuil was to develop cotton and wool trench coat fabric, which was picked up by most luxury brands and is still doing very, very well. So we believe into outerwear in general. We must obviously continue to innovate when it comes down to fabric engineering. This is not something easy, but this is something that is required to keep the attention of the customers, have something new to propose every time. That can be in blending, that can be in fabric structure, that can be, we mentioned about blending wool with man-made fiber. Sometimes at Dormeuil we take the other angle. Most of the product, 99% of the product we do is 100% natural fiber, but sometimes using a bit of man-made fiber in it gives you different attributes. So we need to keep innovating on the fabric. We need to keep innovating on the supply chain. We were one of the first ones to promote a full blockchain system for one of our collections. We've been into traceability for a long, long time. Having spent a number of years in WAGA make me particularly sensitive to the subject. I know what it means. I know how hard it is for you to deal with it, but please, this is an absolute requirement from the market. Why do they want that? I'm not so sure, but they ask for it. So if we don't deliver it to them, we won't get the business. That's as simple as that. So basically, that means very often evolving your farm practices, how you grow wool. You've done a lot of work in the last 10 years, and we are very, very appreciative of that. But we will continue to pass on the information and the request of the market so that you can adapt to the best of your possibilities. So in other words, what we need to do is ask you to continue doing the very good job you are doing and you've been doing for a number of years. Indeed, as the chairman of Dormeuil says, at the end of the day, there is no fashion without wool. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're a little bit clearer now on the famous or infamous word of casualization. I just close my presentation by the logo of the company. As I said earlier on, you see this 3 ram's head on it. Shows the commitment of Dormeuil to the wool industry. These represent the 3 founding members of the company back in 1842. Thank you very much.